The Girl from Oto. Book 1, Chapter 13. Autumn 2014. London, England. Zari. Zari emerged in a driving rain from the Charing Cross tube stop. She flicked up the hood of her raincoat and hurried past the stone lions standing guard over the sloped expanse of Trafalgar Square. This morning she had left her friend's flat in Islington with plenty of time to spare, but a line closure forced her to reroute and take a lengthy detour. In the cavernous lobby of the National Portrait Gallery, a placard next to an information kiosk read, Winter Speaker Series. Conservation of Paintings, Secrets Revealed. Dr. John Drake, Art Conservator. "Where is this, please?" Zari asked the clerk at the desk, pointing at the placard. "You're late." The woman waved at a vast set of double doors, her polished pink nails gleaming. "That way." Zari speed-walked into an immense gallery with polished parquet wood floors, persimmon-colored walls, and a vaulted ceiling. A wash of light filtered in from the skylights overhead. She approached a group of people gathered around a bespectacled man wearing a gray suit. "Ah, welcome," John said, flicking his eyes in her direction. She nearly blurted out a hearty American-style greeting, then downgraded it to a head bob and a vague approximation of a smile. When in Rome, she reminded herself. "The conservation of paintings is about the marriage of art and science," he said, gesturing to the group to follow him. "Our eyes can trick us, but with infrared cameras, X-rays, and other gifts of technology, we can now see what's invisible to our eyes. That's why my favorite part of the job, when I channel my inner Sherlock Holmes, is going into the lab." He rubbed his hands together like a witch crowing over her bubbling cauldron, eliciting a laugh from the group. John's theatrical side had not been in evidence when Zari met him the first time. She eyed his gray suit. Was that bespoke? It was a trimmer fit than an American man would wear, and he wore it well. "Is your job also to verify the history of a painting?" asked an elderly woman with a cloud of white hair. "Yes. Some of the most intriguing questions involve paintings whose assumed provenance is proven wrong, but whose date of origin is correct. So, if a painting is wrongly attributed to Botticelli, but is proven to have been painted in Botticelli's time, the question remains, whose work is it?" They entered a series of galleries painted in pale neutrals, their floors made of simple hardwood planks. A low barrier that looked like a dark metal pipe ran around the perimeter of each room, mounted at arm's length from the walls. Frosted windows over connecting doorways let natural light filter into the galleries. John stopped in front of a modestly sized portrait of a man wearing a long brown robe and a hat that resembled a fez. This painting was assumed to be the work of Hans Holbein the Younger, one of the German masters in the early Renaissance period, and it has been sold as such to a long string of owners. Eventually, it came into the possession of the museum. He held up a large color photograph. "Look closely at this." "But it's the same man, wearing a different hat and with a different background," said the white-haired woman. "Correct. It is the same man. In fact, it is the same painting. When the museum acquired it, the man wore this black skull cap and was standing in front of a blue background. It turns out the painting was actually executed by an unknown German painter, then doctored up a few hundred years after its creation to appear more like a Holbein. The blue paint and the short hat were added sometime in the 18th century. "Why are some paintings analyzed like this while others are ignored?" asked a whip-thin man whose hands were stuffed in the pocket of his dark jeans. "All the paintings in this museum are cared for, but mostly to prevent any further deterioration," John said. "Intensive conservation is simply too costly, both monetarily and in terms of damage to the work. Mind you, our techniques are becoming less invasive, but there are always risks involved when you deal with linen or wood or paint that dates back hundreds of years, It's all very fragile. Zari spoke up. NGOs cover the cost of art conservation in some cases. There's a group based in the U.S. that restores the work of women artists. The thin man swiveled and stared at her. From this time period? Women just weren't artists in those days. A few of the women in the group directed icy looks at him. He shoved his hands even further into his pockets, and his voice took on a defensive tone. It's not opinion, it's fact. I'm sorry, but that's not true, Zari shot back. There were women artists. I'd like to hear what the expert has to say, the man said. His narrow face and small pointy nose put her in mind of a rodent, and not a chinchilla or a long-eared rabbit, a rat. Dr. Durrell is an expert, John said firmly. She knows more about the topic of women artists during this era than I do. He nodded in Zari's direction. Please continue, Dr. Durrell. Take Artemisia Gentileschi, Zari said after a moment, sifting through her mind for the right words. An Italian painter of the 17th century. Her father was an artist and her early teacher. She was the first female student to be admitted to the Academy of Art in Florence, where artists learn the techniques of Renaissance masters. For a long time after her death, she was ignored and forgotten, but she's been gaining recognition over the past few decades. Zari glanced at John. His open expression was all the encouragement she needed to continue. In the 16th century, a nun in Florence named Suor Platina Nelli churned out paintings on commission for churches and private citizens alike, she went on. Her father was an artist, like Artemisia's. Even with training by an artist father or brother, women faced the obstacle of not being permitted to work with live models. The figurative work of masters like Leonardo da Vinci depended on years of experience drawing and painting the nude human body. Women did not have that privilege. There are many more examples I could share with you, but I'll give you just one. Judith Lester, a Dutch painter of the 17th century, whose work was so similar to the master Frans Hals that many of her paintings were falsely attributed to him after her death. What? Said an American voice. It belonged to a round-faced woman wearing a white sneakers and a pink raincoat that was partially unzipped, revealing a black fanny pack around her waist. Zari nodded. It's true, and it was common. Women's work was not valued in the art marketplace. Female artists' paintings were often unsigned or attributed to men in order to fetch a better price. The group was silent. She pointed at the portrait of the somber man in the fez-style hat. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. We don't know who painted him. We now know that Hans Holbein did not. But perhaps some German woman artist was responsible, someone whose work was exquisite but whose gender made her paintings worthless. It's entirely possible. She shrugged. When she spoke again, it was in a low, dramatic whisper. There are some things we'll never know. A laugh rippled through the group. When the lecture was over, Zari and John walked to the room that contained Flemish and Dutch works from the 16th century. Some of the paintings were immense, with ornate gold frames. Others were small and framed in plain wood. Most of their subjects were richly dressed merchants whose fortunes had been made during the medieval heydays of Flanders and Amsterdam. Their clothes were elegant but simple, their wealth displayed mostly through the jewels that adorned their fingers, necks, and wrists. They stopped in front of a small painting with a gold frame. It was Cornelia van der Zee's portrait of Saskia Hodge, a middle-aged woman growing stout around the middle. She was dressed in similar fashion to the woman in Fonbroke College's portrait, her black dress topped with a Tudor-style pleated collar. Her hands, their fingers laced together, rested at her waist. Despite her obvious wealth and comfortable place in the world, Saskia Hodge's well-padded face was entirely somber, her dark eyes revealing nothing. No matter how long Zari stared at the portrait, no matter the angle she approached it from, she was unmoved. I don't know, John. When I look into her eyes, I get nothing back. Were you expecting her to chat with you? No, it's just that the Fonbroek portrait is different. That woman's eyes communicate. They follow you around. Whereas Saskia Hocha's, well, dead fish eyes comes to mind. Your descriptive powers are remarkable. Zari laughed. Thanks. It's a skill I take great pride in. Speaking of the Fonbroek portrait, John said, our imaging process is revealing quite a lot. Such as? Painters in that era typically began the initial drawing on a cartoon, a piece of paper essentially, and transferred it onto the panel. Our images showed the underdrawing of the portrait was not transferred from a cartoon. It was done freehand with a metal stylus directly on the panel, and it is extraordinarily detailed. On the drawing, in Latin, are written in charcoal the words, "Pray for my mother." I'll email you photos. There's one detail that I had to share with you today, though. What? Zari asked. This. He held out a cream-colored envelope. Zari opened it and slid out a photocopy of a black and white drawing that showed the word Mira in italic lettering. A drawing of a young nun made up the letter A. Her body was draped languorously over the top of the letter, her habit trailing out to form its long tail. She had wide eyes and dark eyebrows. Zari stared at the tiny image for a moment in silence. Is this normal? She finally asked. I mean, finding something like this? He smiled. There is no normal when it comes to centuries-old works of art. I've seen plenty of underdrawings, the odd word or phrase scribbled on the panel, but nothing like this, no. She traced the outline of the nun's body with a fingertip. But what does it mean? It could mean something profoundly significant. The trouble is, we'll likely never know. And what about the background? You were right. The dark background was not original. Zari drew in a sharp breath. It wasn't? There appears to be a landscape underneath it. That's fantastic! In the next instant, Zari's elation vanished. But all of Cornelia van der Zee's other known works are interiors, every last one. This doesn't bode well for Cornelia van der Zee, John admitted. But the more pressing issue is the fact that restoration is proving to be quite complex, and complex equals costly. I've given an estimate to the client for the treatment phase of the job, and I have yet to hear back. You mean you might not finish the analysis? If the client chooses not to go forward with the treatment phase, we're done. On the train from London to Scotland, Zari wrapped a wool scarf around her neck. Her throat burned, and she had the beginnings of a headache. She leaned her head against her seat back and stared dully out the window, watching the rain-soaked landscape flash by in a muddle of green. Frayed leaves tore loose from the trees that bordered the fields and streams on either side of the tracks and swirled in a flurry to the sky. She fished out a packet of cough drops from her bag and unwrapped one. Would her first significant discovery be to debunk the Fonbroek College portrait as the work of Cornelia van der Zee? An imaginary headline unfurled in her mind. Naive postdoc discredits the very artist she set out to illuminate. She envisioned the social media bashing that would follow, a roar of insults echoing over cyberspace. Hashtag postdoc dummy, hashtag Zari duh rel. The abusive hashtags would rain from the sky like hot tar from a white tower and detonate in the fields below, wreaking havoc on hapless postdocs while armor-clad tenured professors looked on stonily from the parapets. The absurdity of the image made her smile, but only for a moment. What she accomplished during this year in Europe would either boost or derail her academic career. Her goal was a tenure-track position at a university in California or the Pacific Northwest. Such jobs were scarce for scholars of art history, and her debt load from student loans was never far from her mind. Landing a tenured position was the only way she could earn enough income in academia to live comfortably and pay off her debts. She had moonlighted her way through graduate school, designing and building websites. She liked the work. It was easy and satisfying, and it paid well. There was the added bonus of being able to work at any hour of the day or night in yoga pants, listening to loud medleys of Broadway show tunes and 1970s funk. The truth was, she could make far more income working in the high-tech industry than she would ever earn as a professor. But the work that fueled her, the work she loved, was the joyful chaos of diving down research rabbit holes and connecting threads of history that had unraveled long ago, and she had only just begun. Zari closed her eyes. The image of John in his gray suit and wire-rimmed spectacles surfaced in her mind. She pushed it away, rummaged in her messenger bag, and pulled out her laptop. She had tracked down the owner of Cornelia Vanderzee's portrait that sold at auction in France, Laurence Saravet, a scholar of medieval art who lived in a small French city called Pau. The city was in the foothills of the Pyrenees, maybe a bit more than an hour's drive from the Atlantic coast, not far from the border with Spain. Zari began tapping out an email to Laurence Saravet, conscious of the gentle sway of the train rolling along the slick tracks. Perhaps the underdrawings were meaningless. Perhaps the landscape hidden under the black background was too. And even if the Fontbroke College portrait wasn't the work of Cornelia Vanderzee, perhaps this new find in France was. Zari peered at a thumbnail image of the merchant family's portrait on her laptop screen, hesitated a moment, and resumed typing. "Cornelia Vanderzee," she pleaded silently. "Reveal yourself."